Hello and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective here on Heavenward Thinking. Today we're continuing on in the book of Luke. We're in Luke chapter 7 verses 1 through 10. So I'll read it and we'll get right into this week's discussion. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation, and it has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith, even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. This is another familiar passage. As we look at this, what can we see with a fresh perspective?
Well, I mean, there's things that are interesting, right, that aren't really going to go with the whole idea of, the profoundness of this whole thing, right? But I was caught up by, there's a centurion servant whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. And it makes you think, I wonder what happened if it was a servant that he didn't value highly, right? Like, so, I mean, we look at that and say, this is a servant that it was highly valued, which kicked the centurion into action. First and foremost, this is how we're supposed to feel about everybody, right? So it doesn't matter whether or not we know them, whether or not we like them, whether we value people highly. Why? Because God made them, right? So again, the second that you are declaring somebody bad, ugly, stupid, dumb, like worthless, raka, all that stuff, you're saying that God made a mistake. That God highly values us and people. He wants us to be well. He wants us to bring people to him, regardless of who they are to us. He wants us to have this idea, we highly value this person.
Absolutely. It's important that we value everyone in our lives and that we treat them with love, because we saw just a chapter back that we're supposed to love everyone, even our enemies. And so even if this was an enemy of the centurion, if he was a Christian, you would want to see him display the same value for that person. We would want to see that in our own lives. We need to see that. We need to be able to value people highly because, like you said, they're made by God in the image of God. And so then we look at here, he's sick, about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus, and he sent people to get Jesus. So what does this show us about Jesus and our relationship with him?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd like to reiterate what I just said, which is now you got people who are going to Jesus on behalf of the centurion because he's just a great guy. He helped build our synagogue. Like, well, wait a minute. What if he hadn't been? What if he was really mean? What if he was terrible? Would they still have gone on behalf of him to Jesus? And the answer to that, we all know, is nope. No way would he do that, right? So again, we have to think about this and say, Jesus told us, pray for your enemies. You gotta bring people to Jesus, right? In this case, he wanted Jesus to come and heal his servant. So the people went on this guy's behalf, which again, moral integrity, guy's a great guy, and so they went on behalf of, they're like, Jesus, you got to come heal this guy's servant, right? It's a great story. It's a story of Jesus honoring those who were honoring and fearing God.
Absolutely. And then we see that Jesus goes with them. He answers their request and starts going, but yet he gets stopped. It says he was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I did not deserve to have you come under my roof." What does this show about the respect this centurion had for Jesus?
Yeah, so, I mean, first and foremost, it shows humility, right? It shows us his place versus Jesus. And listen, this is the key to Christianity. We have to continually be seeing ourselves in contrast to God, to Jesus, right? Like, we don't deserve anything. We have a right to ask. And this guy was like, apparently he didn't even come to ask, right? He sent other people to ask because he didn't consider himself worthy. We live in a time where I think people have this flipped, right? We kind of prod people on to thinking they're worthy somehow. Live a life worthy of Jesus healing you. Well, listen, there's some truth in that, but the bottom line is Jesus doesn't heal the sick, the blind, the lame, and the imprisoned, right? Because they're somehow worthy of him healing them, right? He heals them because that's who he had a heart for. Like, so again, Jesus doesn't answer and go, yeah, let me take out my notebook. Yeah, this guy's a pretty good. On a scale of 1 to 10, he's a 9. Yeah, he's a good guy. I'll go with it. It just simply says, and Jesus went with them.
Absolutely. And as you said, it's so important that we have that humility that the centurion showed. And it's amazing that he was showing it, and that Jesus recognizes his humility and recognizes his faith, because he asks, or he says something, he requests something that is really profound. He says that he's not worthy to have Jesus come to him, but just say the word and his servant's going to be healed. That shows such a great faith, that he believed that Jesus was who he said he was, and he believed that Jesus had incredible power, so much that Jesus, when he hears this, is amazed and says, I've not found such great faith even in Israel. What does this show us?
Well, listen, this is critical to you and I. Right? We don't have Jesus walking around. I don't get to grab my sick friends or sick family members or throw you over my shoulder and take you to Jesus. Right? I don't get to do that. Right? So we better believe this. We better believe that Jesus answers still. Right? That he doesn't have to be physically present here in order to heal. Right? We better believe and really put together this whole idea like Thomas believed because he could see Jesus, right? We better believe without being able to see him and have this kind of faith. If we want people to get healed, right? Like, again, I was talking about it with somebody today. Like, there is nothing wrong with going to the doctor. But you better serve a God who can heal first, right? You better go to Jesus first. Now, if he chooses to use the doctor, fantastic. But your first thing ought to be, I believe that Jesus can heal, and I don't need him to be physically here. I can just ask him, right? This is key. This is important for us here today.
Absolutely. It's so important that we have that kind of faith, like the centurion, who we don't get, as you said, we don't get to be like a lot of the Israelite people at this time, where they got to see Jesus do all these amazing miracles, and where they got to go physically and enter his presence and be healed and receive all these great things. We don't get to do that. We have Jesus with us all the time in our hearts. We serve Jesus, a risen Lord and Savior who is mighty and powerful. We don't get to always see physical manifestation of that in our lives, and yet we need to have this kind of faith, because we know that Jesus, who healed this man's servant here, we see that in verse 10, that the servant was found well when the men returned. So we know that Jesus healed. We serve that same Jesus. He can still heal today. We just have to have that faith that God can do, and Jesus can do what he says he can do.
Well, and that he wants to do. That he wants to do this. And we need to understand that and grasp that. I think that the key to all of this really is understanding that it says, then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Well, you got to go back and who were those men? Oh, those men were elders of the town, right? These are the leaders, right? These are the leaders of the town. Saw this whole thing happen. They got to witness that. Why is that important? Well, because they're the leaders of the town, right? And so they're going to be looking at this whole thing and saying, wow, we watch this. It verifies, it affirms who Jesus was, what he did, right? There's no denying. God wants us to be in such a place that we can't deny who Jesus is. If we're walking around, it's part of the deal with you and me in life. If we're walking away in such a way that people kind of think maybe we're Jesus-like, or they know Jesus, or they talk about Jesus, that's not going to work, right? We want to live our lives in such a way that people know we know Jesus. Well, you get the elders of a town on board, you're in a pretty good place, right? So this whole thing starts off with, hey, can you go get Jesus? I don't really know why a centurion sends the elders of the city, right? All the politicians, the leaders, right? But he sends the elders of the town to go find Jesus, and at the end they leave Jesus, right? So they don't know what's going on here. Jesus says, "Hey, go ahead. I tell you, I haven't found any such faith here in Israel, right? So they don't know what's happened, though. They have to go back and affirm it. Like, hey, we went to Jesus. We asked him to come. He was coming. The centurion said, hey, no need. Don't worry about it. Just say the word and the guy's going to be healed, right? That's a lot more power than Jesus walking up and hugging on them, doing it. This is Jesus saying a word, and it's done.
And it really shows his power and who he is, who he was, and who he will be.
Yeah.
That he really, truly was the Son of God. And that's the Lord that we serve. We just have to have faith in him and then share what he does in our lives, the amazing, incredible miracles he does with other people, so that, as you mentioned, we can point people to Jesus. And that's so key here, that lots of people were able to see Jesus' power here and in many of these stories when they believed and when they shared with other people what Jesus had done in their lives. And that's what we're supposed to do on a daily basis, share with other people what Jesus is doing on a daily basis in each of our lives. Well, I hope that you've been challenged by this, and that you'll join us next time for another episode of A Fresh Perspective here on Heavenward Thinking.